What's up, everybody? Welcome back to SSPN. I'm Jude. That's my man, Ethan. And I didn't even point on the screen there, but it doesn't matter because we're back, Ethan. How are you, my guy?
I'm good, buddy. I got a little bit of a sore throat, so I
Yeah,
apologize for that. But I'm happy to be here nonetheless. How are you?
I'm pretty good, man. I got a final project done at about 6 today, just in time for the stream, and I'm so excited to finally talk about the Spurs. We've been on a 2-week hiatus since we made the pregame show for the play-in game, which the Spurs did unfortunately lose. I was
We
wrong on
didn't
my
lose.
prediction.
We got second.
We got 10th, technically.
In the game, we got second. No, I know what
That's
you mean, though.
so true. We did get second in the game, and second is the best.
Yes, exactly.
Anyways, but so yeah, we'll just go back to that game a little bit before we jump into some off-season stuff with the Spurs season, now being officially over, and we'll talk about the playoffs maybe a little bit at the end because look at the Pelicans. I know that the Phoenix won last night, but still, obviously a tough team, right? But just what were your thoughts on that game? I thought it was really similar to the Grizzlies game last year, but it had a little bit of differences.
Yeah, eerily similar. Well, first and foremost, the Pelicans are just a flat out better team. I can admit that they have better talent all around. Their bench is a little bit more, filled out. Brandon Ingram is on a whole nother level. But I think the other thing that really kind of derailed us was Dejounte being sick for those couple of weeks prior. He clearly wasn't himself. Then the refs really kind of put him in foul trouble early, so he was out of rhythm. And then Jakob Poeltl was also in and out of foul trouble throughout the game. So we just never found our rhythm, which is this exact same thing that happened last season. But shout out to Devin Vassell, man. Really the only bright spot because Keldon was MIA. DJ, like I said, in foul trouble, but he had, I think, was it 23 points, a career high for him?
I'm looking at the stats right now. That's what I was trying to find. Yes, 23, 2, and 3.
Yeah, he played a really good game. The only bright spot because he was really like a spark plug for us. And for a little bit there, it looked like we might actually be able to get back into the game because of him. But he obviously we couldn't get it done. I was a little surprised Lonnie Walker did not play that much. I think he only had 17 minutes or so. But
Yep.
from what I saw, I thought he was really giving us, some instant offense. I
And
don't know
he
what
was
happened.
he was liking a lot of tweets after the game talking about how he felt like he should get more PT and then unliked him later. So probably a little
Mhm.
bit of an emotional reaction from Lonnie there. But yeah, 12 points on that night. And I think he had a couple misses, but like overall, he was getting us some buckets when we needed to.
And some energy off the bench that was desperately needed because the Pelicans had all the momentum the entire game. Man, it was pretty rough to watch.
Yeah. For some reason, it's like been super hard to find the stats, but I can't get like the exact shot count. But he did shoot 55% in that game, so like he shot well.
Yeah.
So definitely, what that was probably the most interesting aspect of the play-in for me was Lonnie only getting around 17 minutes. I was expecting him to get more, especially considering like we drafted him. What did we draft him? No, we didn't draft him before Dejounte, but he's still like one of the older young guys, if that makes sense. I know that sounds weird, but he's in his contract year, right?
hmm
So it was just really interesting to see that. But looking at some of the other players in this game, I was looking at Tre Jones' stat, didn't really do much. He just kind of had to play his backup role. And we were just getting killed there for a while. I'm trying to think of the memories of any Tre Jones. Not anything there, though. Jay Rich hit some clutch shots late. Still only had about 12 points, 2 rebounds, and 2 assists. But, yeah, really, when it comes to that plan, man, when you get Dejounte Murray and Jakob Poeltl having 2 fouls in the first quarter, like, we were lucky to only be down, like, 11 at halftime, I think is what it
hmm
was.
Yeah.
So, like, that was just kind of doomed from the start with that. And then on top of that, when you consider that you just look at their talent, and even without Zion, like we were talking about it in the pregame show, you have a big three of Jonas Valanciunas, who has proven before that he can beat up Jock in the paint. And then you have Brandon Ingram on the wing, which he was really just taller, lengthier. Like Keldon can play great defense, but even Brandon Ingram is just with his length, he's shooting over a pretty big guy in Keldon, right?
Yeah.
He's got a big body. And then you've got CJ at the point guard, who is an experienced player, can kind of run the offense. I mean, even Jose Alvarado was going crazy on us, man. Herb Jones, you talked about him. We saw it in the game. I mean, they're a really good team. They're better than the Spurs just overall. And when it came to that run, I was just happy that we got back in it late, really, and gave ourselves a shot. But really, I think that it's hard to get into rhythm and like play the way the Spurs want to play when Dejounte and Jakob are like forced off the floor.
Yeah, 100%.
So good job hanging around. Like,
yep. Shout out to y'all.
Well, now that we've gone through our painful, horrendous memories of that game, we can look towards the future and look at some good stuff with the San Antonio Spurs team potentially. And what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to run through every player on the roster, and we're basically just going to talk about his future going into the offseason, what we feel like he's going to be like on the floor, and then also just like kind of his role in like a team leadership perspective. Like, is he going to be a star? Is he going to be a role player, et cetera, as well as maybe what they can improve on like skill-wise and what they can bring to the table. So I'll just start off right here. This is just kind of random, but it does start off with one of the bigger names on the roster, and that's Keldon Johnson. Ethan, what are your thoughts on Keldon kind of going into this offseason?
I hope he takes it upon himself to improve his handles and or his mid-range game. If he can do one of those two things, honestly, handles first, I think everything else will kind of come second. Because everyone has that same gripe with Keldon. It's either 100 miles an hour to the rim, or it's, standing behind the three-point line and knocking down an open spot-up jumper. But if he can get just any of those handles to kind of, I don't know why I said it like that. If he can get some handles, he'll be able to create shots not only for himself, but for other players.
He's to deepen his bag.
Yes, thank you. And I do think he'll be the second leading scorer again next season. I think this year he finished averaging 17 points per game. I don't think it's unlikely for him to get to that 20 points per game mark next season, Jude.
I don't think it's unlikely either. I was thinking about it just kind of coming into this episode, Ethan, and I feel like there's 4 guys on the team that have star potential, potentially, right? Mm-hmm. But I think there's 2 guys on the team that definitely have star potential, and I think that's Dejounte Murray and Keldon Johnson for sure. I really believe in Primo, and we'll get to him later, and Devin and Primo were the other 2 that I think have the potential to be. We just got to, wait a little bit longer because we've only seen a rookie season. I can believe as much as I want, but I want to see a little bit more of him getting consistent playing time before I'm like, oh my God, he's going to be an all-star, which is exactly what I did with Keldon, and it turned out that, yep, he can be that. What we saw from him this season, I mean, look, the three-point shooting, let's just start right there. I don't know exactly where he finished in the percentage rankings, but if you would have told me Keldon Johnson was shooting over 40%, like not 40%, like 41, 42, because I know that's around where he finished, like I would have been like, that is an insane upgrade for him, and that would have been a win for me on his development for the season. If you would have just told me that straight up. If you would have told me like 38%, I would have been like, wow, that makes us a much better team. But that sort of improvement, I think that's 1, a testament to Chip England and what that man can do. And then 2, also Keldon's work ethic. And just the way that he was able to grow as a player this year. I mean, we saw multiple 30-point outings from him. It wasn't maybe as consistent as we would like all the time, but that second half of the year, it was as close to being consistent as you can be, because he was really, at least, even like his down nights turned from 10 points to like 19 points in the second half of the year, or 18, 15. And that, I think, was a big jump from him. So I really think that the Derek trade really opened up the floor for him, and that allowed him to kind of have more space and have the ball more to really, thrive in kind of that second man role behind Dejounte.
And all of that while playing power forward, being guarded by guys that are like 3-4 inches taller, 20, 30 pounds heavier. So if we can get somebody to kind of move into that 4 spot, allow him to slide back to the 3, his game will look even better.
Yep, and that'll allow him to utilize his shooting more because he'll be on the perimeter more. But in order to do that, he kind of has to do what you said, get a little bit more deep in his bag, get some crossovers, get some more hop steps, get in the gym with Dejounte. Dejounte's got a lot of dribble moves, man. Mm-hmm. So all he has to do is, let Dejounte get him right, and he'll be good to go for sure. Only 22 years old for Keldon Johnson. So, I mean, the sky's the limit for him. Eric Pacina said, what's up in the chat? What's up, my guy? Good to see you back. First one in, first comment for show. But the second person on our list, Ethan, unless you don't have any more comments about Keldon.
I'm good.
Devin Vassell, the one man that showed up in that game, like you mentioned. I forgot to talk about that, but I mean, just to see that from him in the big moments, that really makes you feel good about Devin Vassell moving forward into this offseason. He really showed the ability to be a sniper in that game, and it was kind of really good to see because in the latter half of the year, it felt like he kind of fell off when when it came to his shooting. And like we know that he's a shooter, you can just tell by his form, but everybody has hot and cold spells. So to see him do that in the play-in game, it really boosted our confidence, or at least my confidence, and it was great to see that from Devin. Still only, I think he's 21 years old. I mean, 6'7", he's got some versatility. If you want to go small ball, obviously you and I would like to, make a little bit more of a push for some height on the team. But whenever it comes to Devin, he has that ability in the modern NBA to play 2 through 4, just with this height and length. So what were your thoughts on Devin kind of going into this offseason?
I'm happy with what he brought this year, averaging 12 points a game. But there's something about Devin going into next season that our other young guys really didn't have to experience, and that is there's nobody in front of him now. Like everybody else kind of had an excuse, like, oh, well, Keldon has DeMar playing in front of him, so obviously he's not going to be that productive. Same thing with DJ. They had a little bit longer of a window to kind of have that, oh, but he's just playing behind a bunch of vets. He hasn't had his opportunity yet. Next season at 21 years old, he's the starting 2 guard, barring any crazy free agency or draft night moves that we potentially might make. So he's got to up his production to at least, I would say, 15, 16 points per game on an efficient shooting clip. I'm talking getting closer and closer to that 40% mark from 3 and just adding a little bit of strength. He's already has the moves to create space and make shots happen for himself. We've seen it on a nightly basis. But I think if he just adds a little bit more strength, the shot will fall with more consistency and he'll be able to finish, amongst the trees a little bit more often. So hopefully that's what he works on this offseason and makes that next jump going forward.
Yeah, I feel like, what you just hit on, kind of driving towards the rim. I think that's really the area where he can improve because he has the ability, like you said. He has the ability to create, but he has the ability to drive too. Mm-hmm. It just seems like sometimes when you're watching those layups, he gets blocked or there's just a body there and he's not able to get the angle he wants. And that would be helpful if he was able to move the guys a little bit with some muscle. But another thing that I forgot to mention about Devin is in that second half of the season when he really took on that starting role after Derek was traded, I mean, you saw the improvement in the team, and I think that he definitely had something to do with that. Yeah. Obviously, like I mentioned, that opened things up for Keldon, but Devin Vassell's defense and the things that he does just off the ball, drawing attention because he's a shooter. I mean, there were so many things that didn't show up on the stat sheet that aren't necessarily quantifiable that he does that really, I think, they create wins. They're winning plays. That's the best way that I would describe him. So you love to see that from him.
And one last thing about Devin, last offseason, he was really getting practice touches with the second unit, being that first guy off the bench as far as scoring the basketball. And then he had halfway through the season with the Derek White trade, moved into the starting lineup. I'm sure that was a big, mental hurdle to kind of get over, figure out where he fits next to DJ and Keldon, all these guys. Yep. So having one more offseason to build that chemistry and figure out where he can get his shots, I think he'll look really a lot better next season.
Yep, and he's going to have more opportunity too. I mean, he is going to be an off-ball. He's probably going to be I want to do what I did in the play-in game every game. And he can be a star. He's somebody, like I said, I believe has the potential to develop because his mid-range game even, and his length too that I've mentioned on this show before. He's just such a versatile player. And it'll be really interesting to see how he rises because if he starts becoming a stud, it's going to be really fun to watch. But Eric has one more question about him. So is Devin a 2 or a 3? If so, does he start at the 3 and Keldon stays at the 4? I think we're going to continue playing him at the 2. Maybe not. I don't know. I was thinking about this today because the other guy I mentioned is Primo, and this is a little bit off topic, Ethan, but I got a question for you. Do you think that the Spurs will go with the Dejounte, Primo, Devin, Keldon, Jakob lineup? Do you think that's their dream? You think that's what they want?
Well, that's what they certainly did down the stretch of the season. I wouldn't
because that way you can play all those guys.
Yeah, it would be a complete 180 from the normal Spurs way of doing things, which is just putting Primo at the end of the bench and going with what we know. So in that in that case, I'd be for it. But I really want to draft or sign a guy that can play the 4 spot that's just taller. I mean, no knock against Keldon. He's just 6'5". Came into the league as a shooting guard, and he's playing the 4 spot,
Yeah.
and he's giving it his best out there. But when we play these guys that are versatile and long, like a Herb Jones and a Jackson Hayes and a Valanciunas, I mean, Keldon was locked up. He couldn't do anything offensively or
And it's not his
defensively.
fault.
It's
Yeah.
not. It's just a system thing. Like there's nothing he can do. So I'd rather him play at the 3 and have Primo come off the bench, because then Primo can really be that primary ball handler too. I know we'll get into that here in a second, but I wouldn't be mad necessarily, and unless they just absolutely didn't draft a 4 and they just decided to roll out the exact same team with no with no backup 4,
Yeah.
and then I'd be a little upset.
I was thinking about that. It's funny you mentioned that, because that's exactly what I was thinking about. I was like, man, I was looking at this roster and I was like, we really could just run it back. Like, and I would, and that's that. Now I think that's what we're gonna do. But anyways, in regards to Eric's question, I think it kind of just depends on what the Spurs do. I see him. I think naturally he's a 3, but I think if we keep Keldon and move him to the 3, then I think Devin will stay at 2. But the thing is, he's such a good shooter, and he's fast too. That's the other thing. And he's such a good perimeter defender. It's like you can kind of play him anywhere, which is one of his biggest benefits.
Yeah, he's a matchup nightmare.
Yep. All right. Well, moving on to number 3, Ethan. This is by far the most intriguing player on this list to me, and that's Lonnie Walker.
Okay. Well, so as we know, he is a restricted free agent this offseason. To me, Lonnie down the stretch kind of came back and got some of my, I don't know,
Your love, your lust.
my love back. Yeah, because every once in a while he'll just turn it on for a couple weeks, and you're like, this is the guy that I've been waiting for. But it's the inconsistency thing that continues to plague him, and I don't know if it's him not getting enough minutes, him feeling uncomfortable because of Pop. A lot of people think that there's that dynamic going on where he just feels trapped by Popovich's system and he can't play freely, all that stuff. I tend to avoid that narrative because, one, I can't prove it, and two, so many guys have shown that Pop's a great coach. Like Keldon has worked through that, DJ, everybody else. So is it just the Lonnie Walker problem? He averaged 12 points a game, so I don't want to say that he was just abysmal the whole year, because he wasn't. But I think we were both expecting 15 plus. And for him to come into the game and be just an absolute microwave, like a Jordan Clarkson type player, which he was not, unfortunately. And then Devin ended up kind of stealing that 6-man role from him. And then Josh Richardson came in, and we were like, oh, Jay Rich is like a better Lonnie because he can actually knock down a 3-ball with some consistency. So all that being said, I wouldn't have a problem bringing him back, especially on the qualifying offer. I'd more than welcome him to come back on that qualifying offer, but I would not pay him really that much at all. So if somebody offers him a big bag, I'm afraid it's, Sayonara Lonnie, thanks for that Houston Rockets game. Have a great career.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Ethan. I really have no words for this. I mean, it's a contract year. Like you said, we were just expecting a little bit more, and we just didn't get it. You saw after the trade, he, like the rest of the team, benefited from the move and played a little better. He's somebody who can go get you a bucket, not really consistently, but from time to time when he decides to. And then defensively, he just never really, he never did anything that wowed you. He just became like an average defender, and that was like this year. He finally became just, all right, he's decent. He's not a liability anymore. And it's just, that's what it kind of came down to. So yeah, I'd bring him back on the qualifying offer also, and I'd love to give him another chance as a 6-man next year. I would love to do that. I think that he could prove me wrong. I think he has all the talent in the world. But just off of this year and what we've seen, what we haven't seen since that Houston game that you mentioned, it's kind of just like I'm not sure if I don't pay him a lot. Don't pay him a lot. That's my thing. So I think he's probably going elsewhere this offseason. Maybe not though.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing for Lonnie is not even just about his play that is like the case for why he should leave. because we have Josh Richardson now, who's playing very well. We have Primo, who's younger and playing very well.
And was a
Tre
higher
Jones,
pick.
Tre Jones, who has surprised a lot of people as a solid backup point guard. His brother's playing phenomenal right now in the playoffs, so that shows me what Tre's ceiling could possibly
And
be.
he came in what, his second year, and has taken the reins of the Popovich offense off the bench.
Yes, we also have Wieskamp, who's going to be coming back, and 3 first-round picks, and one of those is bound to be a guard.
Yep.
So it's like that guard spot's getting backed up once more. So who are we going to keep? The guys that are cheap and the guys that have a lot of potential, or the guy that could potentially cost us a bunch of money?
That the Kings are going to throw $10 million at.
That'd be a fast backcourt. Oof.
Oh my Lord. Oh, Lonnie. I hope we bring him back and give him one more chance because,
Yeah.
I mean,
I like him.
I don't think that Pop gave him the Manu comparison for anything. Like, we know that this guy has talent for sure. It just hasn't worked out so far. But for somebody that it has worked out for is the man we were just talking about, Tre Jones. What are your thoughts on that man, Tre, and what his looks are in the offseason?
I hope he gets consistent minutes next year because I think he can be one of the most reliable backup point guards in the NBA. Just like Tyus Jones, where you can kind of put him in that starting lineup, which is what the Memphis Grizzlies did this season when Ja went out with injury. And they really didn't miss a step because he's just so, efficient, not only with his scoring, but with his passing ability. He's just a natural floor general that understands how to play the game, which is perfect for a Popovich-run system. So next year, I don't think he'll average a lot more points. I think he's a guy that can get like 7 points a game, maybe, and like 5 or 6 assists a game, and play solid defense. Somebody that we can rely on all year long. And for his offseason improvement, I think he just needs to get into the gym and shoot threes. That's all he needs to do because he showed flashes of being able to knock him down in the second half of the season and in the play-in game too. It's just going to be a consistency thing for him. So if he can get to that like 30% mark, he's a dangerous backup point guard, Jude.
Once upon a time, Ethan, on this show, I believe that I said Tre Jones, he didn't have a broken jumper. And some people, they didn't believe me. They didn't believe me, Ethan. And
You're
now
right, Jude.
He made those shots. We saw more as the season went on. And look, he's never going to be like a sniper. That's never what I said. I'm just saying if you leave him wide open, he's going to get to a point where he can knock him down. And really, who knows? I mean, look, I don't know. Maybe he's never going to be a pure shooter, but Tyus can do it, so maybe a couple summers with Chip can do it. We'll have to see. Keldon turned into a 40% three-point shooter, so who knows?
That's true.
I mean, that's crazy to say, but we'll see what happens. We'll see if they can work their magic. But yeah, I mean, just a fantastic defender, a great playmaker, and I mean, just like you said, literally like the perfect backup point guard. He's just like a Tyus Jones clone.
Literally.
and they went 18-2, and then it's just funny because like right now he's like the mini version of Tyus basically, and he literally did the same thing when Dejounte went out, and it was crunch time. It was way smaller. It wasn't 18-2, but it was like he came in, became the starter, and got his team to the playoffs. Like kept them where they needed to be. So yeah, man, I'm really excited to see where Tre is moving forward, and I'm just excited that we've kind of found like the Robin to Dejounte at point guard off the bench. There you go.
I love it.
All right, going back up to the other list, now we have our all-star, Dejounte Murray. There's not too much to be said other than we love him, but Ethan, the floor is yours.
Couldn't have asked for more this season. Really just the biggest bright spot on an otherwise dark
I'm gonna interrupt you.
Season. Go ahead.
What was your prediction this year, Ethan, about Dejounte?
I believe it was 28-8.
I think it was 27-7. You just said to
Was
up
it?
it by like 2. Yeah.
Okay, 27-7. And I was pretty close. 21-8-9 and 2 steals is what he finished at. On a pretty efficient shooting splits as well. The only thing I ask of Dejounte Murray this offseason is to keep working on that jump shot. That's it. Because if he can be an off-ball guard too, this team is very dangerous. Because
He's 26.
He's 26. He can knock it down. We've seen him hit it. If he gets to 34%, 34%, that's all I need. Because then Devin Vassell and Keldon can kind of, take their man off the dribble. And now they can't leave DJ because he's just that much better, that much more of a consistent shooter. So if he can just get that, he's unstoppable. Really, he's a triple double machine that can score at all three levels legitimately. So next season, I'm gonna up him. Let's see, 24, 9 and 9, and another 2 steals a game.
I think that's fair. I think that's a really fair ask. We'll have to see what happens, but man, there's nothing to say. I mean, is this like the most crowded MIP pool ever?
It was definitely
have we had anything like this, anything close to this with this many young players just taking massive jumps? And they're all point guards too. Mm-hmm. Like the 3 finalists are 3 leaders of the team point guards.
They didn't even count LaMelo Ball, who had a pretty good season. Anthony Edwards even could be put in that category, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, exactly. But yeah, going back to our man DJ, I mean, there's not really too much else to say, really, Ethan. I'm with you. Just keep getting in the gym, putting those jumpers up. Because if he can add that to his game, like you said, then really, I mean, that just opens up even more for the offense, which was already opened up after the second half of the season, after the trade deadline. I mean, but I'm trying to think of things to say about Dejounte, but I mean, he didn't really. People might be like, oh, the play-in performance wasn't bad or wasn't good, and that's true. But I also think that he kind of got screwed a little bit. Those were some ticky-tack foul calls that you can go to other calls in that game that were more rough and they weren't called. Mm-hmm. So, plus, and that's not even me saying that they should have been. That's just me saying that there was inconsistency in the officiating in the game, and not saying that's why we lost. I'm just saying that I don't think you can be oh, he's a choker when you get taken out of your rhythm in the first quarter. So
yeah.
Anyways, gonna get a question here from our man Ananta Prajna, and he says everyone talked about DJ's inconsistency before this season, just like everyone talks about Lonnie's. So what are your thoughts on this, Ethan?
I don't think personally, I can't speak for Spurs fans in general, but I never talked about DJ's inconsistency. I thought DJ was, not a very good shooter and kind of, unfortunately, in DeMar DeRozan's shadow. Because he and DeMar had such similar games, it was hard for them to coexist. Therefore, DJ just didn't put up big numbers all the time. That was my biggest gripe. But, yeah, go ahead, Jude.
I think, so, for me, I never thought he was inconsistent on defense. I thought he was inconsistent on offense a little bit, but that was still definitely more based towards the three-point line. But I can say I think that's what he's referencing. There were some times where he'd be on and off. He wouldn't be a ball stopper. But I think that what's the word? I can't think of it right now. The illness there was LaMarcus and DeMar kind of clogging up the offense. And I think that's why you saw this year with DJ being the guy, the inconsistency kind of went away. But that was because of the spacing. I think that messed up his rhythm. The way that we play now, it's way more tailored to his traits. Lonnie's inconsistency, I think, just comes from it's been consistent throughout all of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does.
Through those years, that was still, I don't know. I think that's a little bit, they're not necessarily as comparable, but we'll have to see. He says other channels, but then he says, yeah, true. So, okay, we appreciate you, Ananta. All right, we'll move on to the next one, and that is Dejounte Murray's big, and that is Jakob Poeltl, who's got one more year left on his deal. Should be interesting.
I think he's a steal for his current price, averaging about 13 and 9 a game, not to mention the 3 assists. I was not expecting this good of a season from Jakob. And I think he started stronger than he finished. I'm not sure why, but I don't know. Because a little bit inconsistent in his aggression. When he was aggressive, he was terrific and clearly, to me, a top 10 center in the NBA. But when he got conservative, when he started playing soft, he was a little tough to watch. Trade bait, yeah, Eric. I think he could be trade bait this season because he's an expiring deal. Because there was so much.
There's a lot of bigs available in free agency too.
people really wanted him at the deadline this season, and we just couldn't get a deal done. Especially if we kind of want to move up in the draft or draft a big and then kind of give them free reign over that center spot. Who knows? But assuming we have him next year, I don't expect a huge jump from him. Probably around the same 13-9. Just continuing to do Jakob things, playing great defense, and every once in a while having a good offensive game.
Yeah, I think that's another great sum up there, Ethan. Whenever it comes to Jakob, this year, I think the improvements that we saw from him were just like you said. We saw a little bit more of aggressiveness. Still not as much as maybe we would like, but we saw it a lot more. And he had a bunch of other 20 and 11 games, close to triple doubles almost, sometimes passing the ball. So he definitely had some improvements. This was the best year of his career, I'd 100%. Say.
Yeah.
But still, I think, unfortunately for Jakob, I think that at his best on a championship roster, he is your backup center because he's got a little too slender of a frame. He gets pushed around. You like it because he can run the floor better than a lot of other bigs. So there's pros and cons to his frame. And one of the cons is just that in a play-in matchup, he's going to get pushed around by Jonas Valanciunas. And Valanciunas is going to go for 20 and 10. And, that's the difference between, your Karl Anthony Townses of the NBA, those type of guys who can bang and stretch the floor. Jokic, I mean, obviously, Jakob shouldn't have to be those guys with his skill set. But, that's just the difference between him and those type of guys. Even you could say a Julius Randle. Obviously, we kind of backed off of that a little bit, but that's somebody else who could just be able to bang down low in a way that Jakob can't. So he has his limitations, but still, I love his chemistry. I love what he does. There's some inconsistency, but for $9 million, I'm I want him on my team because that's a steal at the NBA rate that he'd get paid.
100%.
Let's see. Our man RR210 Texas says, should the Spurs go after Ayton? And it seems like that we got a lot of, Ethan, or like Eric said, trade bait. So what are your kind of thoughts to potentially moving him because he is such a movable contract and getting a big available in the offseason like a DeAndre Ayton? I know we've talked about this a little bit, but just to answer our man's question. And then also, other options like a Mitchell Robinson. I can't remember the other centers, but I know there's some other decent centers out there that maybe a lot of people would consider an upgrade.
Well, with Ayton, I'm 100% on board. I would love to get DeAndre Ayton. I think he's a tremendous improvement at that center spot. He can do everything that Jakob Poeltl can, but he can also just score more as far as a low post scorer. Also, he's younger, more athletic, all those things. My only question is I have no idea if he has any interest in not only leaving Phoenix, but just coming to San Antonio. Yeah. I have heard nothing about him wanting to come to San Antonio, being at all connected to San Antonio. If he is, then yes, 100%. Let's trade Jakob on draft night and go sign DeAndre Ayton. I just don't think it's very likely at all. Mitchell Robinson, I like Mitchell Robinson. My only worry with him is injury. And statistically, he does about the same thing as Jakob Poeltl. I know he's more athletic, which makes a lot of people excited. And some people are really into him. But it just makes me nervous. Probably because I just haven't watched enough live New York Knicks basketball to tell you, Jude. But I'm not against making an improvement at the center spot because I don't think Jakob Poeltl is our center of the future. I just think for right now, like Jude said, for the price you're paying, he's a great option.
So I'm going to give you some other names here, Ethan, and I want to tell me what you think about him because I think this is an interesting discussion that a lot of Spurs fans would want to talk about, but also I think this is realistic. This is, if the Spurs were going to make a trade, I could see this being a move just because his contract is such a steal. So Nurkic, that's somebody else. And I feel like that's somebody who would be obviously he's got some injury wear and tear, but still only 27. And he's somebody else, he reminds me of a Valanciunas. He's somebody who can bang. There's obviously Ayton. Serge Ibaka is out there. I don't think that's somebody that we want. Okay. Thomas Bryant and Mo Bamba. Those were the other two that I was looking at. And Andre Drummond. And Drummond's been playing well. I don't know if that's necessarily an upgrade over Jakob, but he's been playing well. I liked what he had with the Nets. I feel like now he knows his role, and if he'd be willing to come on like a cheap deal, that'd be somebody that could bring something. But
yeah, here's what I'll say about that.
His defense is nowhere near Jakob's, though, the more I'm thinking about it.
My thing here, Jude, I'm not against that. But the only reason I would sign a guy like an Andre Drummond or a Serge Ibaka, I can't remember the third name that you just said.
How about this is Nurkic.
Nurkic, yeah. Well,
Or Mo Bamba.
Mo Bamba. I like
Thomas,
Mo Bamba.
Thomas Bryant.
The only reason I would sign one of those guys, because none of those guys, other than DeAndre Ayton, to me, are like going to take us to that next level. So the only reason I would sign one of them is if I drafted a center with our first pick, trade Jakob, bring another piece in, maybe a 4 or just like a draft pick, who knows, whatever. Sign one of those guys just to kind of be a place setter for now, so that our draftee can kind of grow without having to be that number one guy right off the bat. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure. In all honesty, I'm looking at some of these names and like there's an appeal to all of them, but I think that the only one that like really you could say has a higher ceiling for certain is DeAndre Ayton. And my thing with DeAndre Ayton, I know you said you'd like it, you'd be into it. I just would rather save my money and pay Primo, Keldon, and Devin. Like, I'd rather keep those 3 guys somehow, which I think if we bring them up together, they'd be willing to do. It's like on any other team, Dejounte Murray is like already getting paid like $24 million. But because of the Spurs and because they want to keep their core together and like keep the culture and because of, this thing that San Antonio has that a lot of other teams don't have. I think Memphis is building something similar right now. That's something different. But the point is, I don't think those guys will take those deals if we start, we just wouldn't have the money, first of all, but I don't think they'd do it anyways because then we'd be adding another star to the team that would kind of take away from their role. And so that's where M-Easy's question comes in, and that's how much is Ayton going to get paid. If we could get some reasonable deal for DeAndre Ayton, but it's the restricted free agency market, so that's not going to happen. So if we do it, I'm not going to be mad. Like if I'm like, oh, the Spurs, like if it comes out on, Adrian Wojnarowski, the Spurs have offered, a crazy deal to DeAndre Ayton and the Suns aren't going to match. He's a Spur now. I'll be happy because I'll be like, okay, this means that the front office really believes and I trust them more than myself. But until that happens, I'm going to roll with keeping the cap space for other guys that are playing well and we're building this chemistry. Let's not ruin that thing.
And that is 100% what's going to happen.
Hey, we appreciate it. I appreciate it, Eric. That's a good take. And then also, as M-Easy says, bring back Kyle Anderson. I'm for it. I'm for it. I think he would be a fantastic either starting or backup for. And it's like, oh, we could have that, and he can kind of do everything that Keldon does already. Like, he still has the playmaking and shooting. So, versatility. We love it. Let's move on, though. So we last left off on Jakob Poeltl. Let's go to Keita Bates-Diop. This will probably be a short one, but what were your thoughts about Keita Bates?
He's always in the right place at the right time. He doesn't take shots away from anybody. Plays good, versatile defense. Can't ask much more from him because, what would I ask from Keita Bates-Diop? Almost nothing. So every night he always just kind of makes me happy when he plays. I don't expect anything less or more from him next year, just about the same.
Hey, his 30-point game against the Lakers, where technically LeBron James was guarding him, right, will live in Spurs lore forever, right? Shout out to Clan the Spurs fan being in here as well. We appreciate it. Y'all go check out his channel. He's on the Kyle Anderson hype train, at least bringing him back, right? Love. I mean, when you watch like the Grizzlies in the playoffs and you see what he brings, like there's just like, oh my gosh, this is what we thought slow-mo could be when we drafted him, and now he's like fast mo a little bit.
Medium mo.
Medium mo. That's a good way to describe it.
Swiss Army knife.
So after KBD, we got Jock Landale in his rookie year, the 26-year-old rookie, unusual, but we got to see a little bit of him at the 4 at the end of the year. Obviously just a great Spurs culture guy too. Bringing the coffee gang back a little bit with Patty and all the other guys being retired now. What are your thoughts on Jock?
I thought he played well this season. I know everybody was clamoring for him to get minutes early on, and he really wasn't getting them. But when he finally did, he usually made the most of it. always on the offensive boards, always banging down low, a pretty nice jump shot. I know it was a little inconsistent toward the end of the season, but just having a big out there that's a threat to knock down a jump shot was huge for us, scheme wise. I don't know what to expect from him next year, especially since most people think we're going to draft a big at some point in the first round. So I would envision that big taking minutes away from Jock Landale. Plus, we have Zach Collins, who is now back and going to have a full offseason healthy, which is
He though?
nice.
I mean, most likely, but it is a team option.
I would see him coming back.
Yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
I would see that. Yeah. So I don't know what to expect from Jock. But like you said, continuing to be that Spurs culture guy at the end of the bench for sure.
Just got to address Eric real quick. I did not say Patty retired. I just said that, they were the coffee gang. Like, they were the originators of it. It was him, Manu, Boris. So all those guys are gone now. I was saying Jock was bringing it back. And Jock went to the same college as Patty, so he knows about it. He's in the know. And speaking of Jock, it was just awesome to see. I mean, when he did get out there and hit threes, it was just like, oh, a big that can shoot. Obviously, he has some problems defensively. We saw him get pushed around, bullied a little bit, just like we saw in the Olympics a little bit against, guys like Bam Adebayo. But, getting to see him at the 4, I like to see that and see the versatility. I think really the question is in the offseason, something that you've talked about, Ethan, is I wonder if he slims down a little bit and they kind of move him to that 4 position permanently. I don't really think that that's going to happen. I think that he's just going to probably stay as a center and just keep trying to get better. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I think at the end of the day, he's probably just going to be like just a good basketball player. Somebody not super athletic, but just makes the plays, does everything right. I think if he can understand rotations a little bit more and get a little bit smarter, that can make him better. But I'm not sure if he's going to jump into the backup center role or the backup power forward role. But I think he'll be on the roster.
That's a fair assumption.
Yeah. I don't think that would be a pretty crazy assumption now that I'm thinking about it for him to jump in. But let's see what our man M-Easy says. I would look into Julius Randle. Right now he's in a similar situation to Zach Randolph before he went to Memphis. Memphis was able to resurrect his career. A small market SA could help Randle. So I have my reservations about Julius Randle just because of the way that everything's going down in New York. I just don't know if necessarily his personality fits the Spurs. But if the Spurs end up going after Julius Randle, I feel like they're going to get the most out of him. It's kind of like what I said earlier. If the Spurs do end up, just like with Ayton, if they do end up going after him, then I'll believe in it. But until that happens, I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't think it'll happen just because we're San Antonio.
I'll still have reservations, but
yeah. I just don't think the Spurs will make moves like that. If we were to bring him on board, I would be 100% behind him because I do think he has a lot of, skill at that 4 spot he gives us what we need, which is a big forward that can bang, that can score on his own, create for others. And he was an all-star at one point. So we can't forget that. It's only just this past season that he's really struggled. And that's because, I don't know if it was his fault. I don't follow the story closely enough, but the city of New York really just turned on him because they were having a pretty bad year. So I'm not against it, but I just don't think it'll happen. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it happening either. Unless the Spurs, if Brian Wright is going into this offseason and he's like, we're big money playing, then maybe I could see it as a potential player around the league that we go after. But I have a feeling that we'll probably... And we'll get into this probably in another episode, but I have a feeling that, like I said earlier, when you look at this roster, they can bring everybody back, and that's just the most Spurs thing to do, so I feel like that's what will probably happen. Obviously, we'll have our draft picks and maybe a signing here or there. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with Doug McDermott, too. But going back to Julius Randle, I think on the floor, when he is consistent, there is a lot of appeal of bringing him to our roster. It's just the off-the-floor questions for me. And to be honest, I probably need to look into the New York situation a little bit more, and I might have been a little bit premature. But from what I've heard, it doesn't really look like... It just doesn't seem like the way that he's talking about it and the way that he's wanting out, it just doesn't seem like a Spurs player personality trait. So we'll have to see, but I don't really think it's going to happen. But now we'll go to the next person on the list, and I think that this was the more mysterious end of the season, and it might have just been because he wasn't there, and that's Doug McDermott.
I liked Doug McDermott when he was actually playing. I know he got hurt. I was actually at that Indiana game that he got injured. But I thought he brought an interesting dynamic to the team that we hadn't had in a while, which is a guy that doesn't need the ball at all. He's a terrific, mover, from corner to corner, gets open threes, will knock them down with consistency. I know defensively he sometimes struggled a lot, particularly in that Mavericks game. Everybody remembers that when Jalen Brunson just targeted him over and over and over
Pain.
again. And I don't know why we kept switching it, but we did. And he just got abused. If we were to move from Doug McDermott, I don't think it's his fault. I think he's a terrific player that a lot of teams would like, including me, to be on their team. But we just have so many other guys on the roster. And he's a valuable trade asset. So if we are really going to go 100% in to kind of loading up on young guys and rebuilding 100%, it's hard to see him on the team long term. But I would predict exactly the same amount of production from next season if he were to stay, especially since we have a lot of guys kind of stepping up into those, heavy scoring load kind of roles.
Yeah. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch Doug McDermott this offseason because he's a player that's valued around the league. And I think just him playing in the Spurs system and what he brought, like if you turn on his tape, you can just be like, any team can use that. His cutting got better. It seems like he's a little bit faster, a little bit slimmer in the frame. And he's still the shooter that he was, another 40% shooting year. You know what he is defensively, but it seems like his positioning is a little bit better. I remember at the beginning of the year, we were surprised at his defensive ability. We were like, okay, he's not as bad as we thought he was. Obviously he's still going to get beat most of the time, but he gives effort. And at that point, that's really all you can ask. So I just think that he's one of the players to watch that could get moved. I don't know why. I just have this weird feeling just because he's a veteran and the way the season ended as well and the way that the Spurs played without him and Jay Rich, it's like, do you want to, if you're going to pay Jay Rich that same amount of money, you might as well just get something out of Doug when you can send him like anywhere in the league, especially like a championship contender, like send him to Coach Bud, get something back. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything we'd really want on the Bucks, but that we could get for Doug McDermott at least. But anyways, another thing though, before we move on, M-Easy misunderstood me here a little bit. I was saying that I think the Spurs will bring everybody back. He said you would be okay with bringing everybody back. SMH going for the play-in game did nothing for them. I disagree. I think that was some good experience for them. I just think that the refs, that's a whole nother spiel. But the point is, I was just saying that I thought that's what the Spurs will do, not what I would be cool with them doing. Although I honestly, if they did that, I think I would, I don't know. Actually, I don't know if I would be completely cool with it. I'd be okay with it. I wouldn't be like super excited about it though. We'll have to see.
I think Brian Wright making moves at the deadline this offseason has us all kind of in a conundrum. Like, what's going to happen? Because we've never had a GM make moves like this. So now we don't know really what to expect. Because on any other year, you're right. They would just run it back exactly with this exact same team. Maybe re-sign Bryn Forbes. But
again,
but now I really have no idea. I mean, Julius Randle, maybe that is 100% in their, plans to do. Maybe trading all 3 firsts is in their plans to do. Like, we have no idea what they're going to do. So I tend to just kind of stay on the conservative end of things because it's a little bit safer as far as my predictions.
Like, even our trades, like, even though they were big for us, they really weren't that crazy. Like, we traded a guard that wasn't shooting very well for a guard that is now shooting well, another young piece and a pick.
Yeah.
Like, that's not that crazy for most other teams. But for the Spurs, it's like, oh my gosh. But it was also the impact it had on the team too, I think is what makes this discussion even more like there's just more energy in the conundrum you're talking about because of it. But getting back to the task at hand, let's talk about the next person, our chosen one. Joshua Primo.
Very exciting young man. I like him a lot. I think we saw
he's very young. He's the youngest player in the G League and the NBA.
Correct.
Not in the G League anymore, but this season still.
I think he showed his age quite a lot this season. I know he started a lot, but he also never really had more than 20 minutes that often because Pop usually pulled him pretty quickly after he, turned the ball over one too many times or made a mental error or got lost on defensive rotations. But just from a pure potential, what he's showing me right now, the dude has, so much upside. Not only on the offensive side of the ball, Jude, but just defensively. His help defense, his instincts are incredible. And his confidence is just through the roof. There is not a single shot on the court that he does not think he can make, which I like in a young guard. And he's also shown signs of being a terrific playmaker, just like naturally understanding where everybody is on the floor, especially coming off of pick and roll situations, which I did not think he could do when we drafted him out of Alabama. I thought he was really just going to be a 3-and-D guy and get very limited playing time, but he's shown me a lot more. So moving into next season, man, especially if we don't re-sign Lonnie, which I think is likely, I think he becomes that 6-man role for us. We're starting Devin, naturally, and he takes a step up both in scoring and in playmaking, and hopefully can be what Lonnie Walker couldn't be, which is consistent.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to even put him in the same conversation as Lonnie, even though that's a great comparison, just because they're so different. It's like, this is everything we wanted Lonnie to be and more. It's like a gold mine at the 13th pick. I mean, and we were all mad about it when it happened. That's the crazy part. I mean, just it's so wild because we watched the whole year, right? And we watched consistently. So we're like, Primo had an okay year. And then you go turn on his highlight tape and you're like, oh my God, this is like one of the best rookies in the league. Like, not actually, because it's not as long as everybody else's, because he didn't get as much PT, but the talent is there. You see it. You see the dunk to start it off. I mean, we remember that, and to see the energy from him at the end of the year, how he played in those starting moments, how nothing phases him at all, Ethan. Nothing phases him at all. And that kind of gets in to what our man Easy is saying here. Some in Spurs Nation, he says it has to stop with the Kobe comparisons when it comes to Primo. He has upside, but let's relax. But the reason that people make that comparison, and what MAZ is saying is very true. Like, we can't be crowning him one of the greatest players in NBA history after a rookie season that we really didn't get to see too much from him. He was mainly in the G League, right? But it's just the fact that he has that that stoicness about him on the court. And that's something that's very intriguing for a lot of Spurs fans when you combine that with the talent, because like you said, it's like he has the confidence to make every shot and he's never afraid. And then on top of that, he's 6'6", and can play the 1 through 3. And he's only 19. He's so young. At the end of his rookie contract, he's going to be where Quindary Weatherspoon was starting his career. You know what I mean? So it's just super exciting for Josh Primo. Obviously, there were some ups and downs, but when you can see the mental spot that he's at, and for being there at such a young age, it just kind of makes you not worry about the rest of the basketball stuff with the talent he has.
Yeah, and I think where the Kobe comparisons come in, I understand what MAZ is saying. But Kobe in his rookie year averaged 7 points a game and shot 40-something%, like low 40s from the field. And he had that game where
he had way more PT though.
He only 15 minutes a game.
Okay, but that's still more than Primo.
Yeah, it's still more than Primo, but even then, Primo averaged 6 on less minutes per game. So I mean, I don't think it's out of the question. Obviously, he's not Kobe Bryant, but
that's wild. Primo averaged 6. That's crazy. I would expect it more to be 2 or 3, just off the top of my head.
On 19 minutes a game, technically. Even how many games did Kobe play? He played 71. Okay, but I think where I get the Kobe comparison isn't necessarily his game, but just when Kobe airballed 3 balls in a row and just kept shooting them for some reason, that confidence. I see that same confidence, the way he carries himself. Not necessarily his game style, but just the way he the swagger he walks into the gym.
Definitely. I definitely see that, but this is a funny comment. The way they talk about Primo, he better be one of the top 5 players in the summer league. Easy, with funny. Our luck, he ain't playing in the summer league, bro.
Yep.
Bob's holding them out. Anyways, let's move on to the next man on our list, and I'm actually going to skip to some of the guys who got PT, and then we'll go into the rest of the gang. So we're going to jump over to Zach Collins. And so when I mentioned that earlier, I wasn't the Spurs are definitely going to not accept his player or his team option. I was just wondering, hey, you never know with the Spurs. If we are going after one of these bigs, maybe we want to keep Jakob as the backup guy and go after a bigger name, and that means Zach Collins is getting cut, and we're just going to keep Jock as the 3 or the 3rd string. So I think that we're going to bring Zach Collins back, especially like we've mentioned many a times on this show. Even next year's $7 million option, that's not fully guaranteed depending on his performance. So it could really turn into like $2 or $3 million depending on how he plays. Obviously, we hope it jumps up to that 7, but that's yet to be seen. What are your thoughts on this Zach situation and our complete control over his career, Ethan?
I like bringing Zach Collins back next year. I think having a healthy offseason will do wonders for how he played. I mean, he averaged 8 and 5 this year, and a lot of those games were him really not getting that many minutes or sharing backup minutes with Jock Landale. So I think having one more season to really strengthen his body, get his legs back underneath him, get used to playing basketball, get into basketball shape, he'll be a much better backup big come next fall. That being said, if we can get a better, starting big and move Jakob down or trade Jakob, so many situations that we could be encountering this offseason. I'm not against cutting Zach or trading Zach, but for the sake of the video, I think he will be a much improved big next season.
Yeah, I think so too. And especially with the chemistry and the biggest thing, that I haven't even thought when we've mentioned Zach Collins. This is his first time playing consistently in 2 years, right? And he didn't play bad.
No, he didn't.
So I'd be intrigued to play out this contract and see where he is, because at the end of that, he's going to be just entering his prime. Next year he'll be 25, I believe. So I mean, it's crazy to think still younger than Jock. And it's got a lot of potential. That's why I'm saying, the Spurs could really, if they wanted to, they've already got their 3 centers going into the offseason. I think there'll be some moves made, Ethan. But, yeah, with Zach, I'd like to see him come back. But also, if we make a move that, significantly makes us better at the center position instead of playing him, then I'm not going to be mad at it. But the other thing about his contract is he's somebody, just like I said with Doug and kind of with Jakob, somebody else to watch on the trade block, because his contract's very movable and it's super appealing to, maybe like the Magic or something. I mean, obviously there might be some other teams too, but those teams, there'd definitely be some teams that could be interested in a young player that can stretch the floor and plays hard. So, yeah. M-Easy says that he's better at the 4. So, I don't know. Maybe we'll get to see that a little bit more after another offseason of conditioning. I mentioned Jakob earlier. Maybe that's more reasonable to talk about Zach there. I mean, we saw what the Pelicans did. We didn't really get to see the Spurs combat it with the Zach Collins lineup, but I wouldn't be mad at seeing Zach get some 4 minutes. But let's move on to another Spur that joined us midway through the year. And we were really happy about it. Pleasantly surprised. That's Josh Richardson, J-Rich, the man who is just on the NBA UK channel, is in the United Kingdom, and was in Spurs gear, and the Spurs are retweeting it. So, we'll see what happens, but...
It is refreshing to see a veteran that actually wants to be a San Antonio Spur. He fits in with the guys. He's a great culture guy. He's not trying to get in anybody's way. He's not trying to steal minutes or become a star again and revitalize his career. He knows his role. He's an off-ball 3-and-D guy that can provide energy either off the bench or as that starting 2, honestly. He can play either spot. Really like our new Danny Green. I know I say that a lot, but he really is the new
But with
Danny
handles.
Green.
But with handles.
With a little bit more, with a little bit more shot creation.
And
showed that
playmaking.
every once in a while. Yeah. So I was very happy to finally get him on the team. I was a little nervous at first because of how much his statistics had kind of fallen since leaving Miami. But clearly there's something with the pop system. We were able to kind of find some of that juice that was still left in the tank. And he's another guy that really hurts Lonnie Walker's re-signing scenario.
Chances.
Yeah, chances. Yeah. There you go. Because I wouldn't mind him coming off the bench and taking over some of those Lonnie minutes either.
He's a seasoned vet, and he's 28, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's still in the middle of his prime. You can tell he really likes DJ. Like you said, one of the few players and veterans that want to be here. Whenever he got traded, he quote tweeted his tweet from 2014, tweeting about the Spurs when they were winning the championship. I want to play for Greg Popovich. Now he gets to. And I think we just found each other at the right times. He was struggling in Boston. He got traded here. I think the system fit him better. His role was probably a little bit more clearly defined. And just the way that in times where like in the play-in game, for example, where the young guys were getting rattled or the offense wasn't doing well, he was just able to go get us a shot. He was able to take over. As you said, he's mainly that off-ball shooter, but if he had to, he was just the pure vet, and he was able to use kind of those Miami skills that we remember when he had the ball in his hands more, and made some tough shots in that game, which showed a lot to me also how he can play in those moments. The stat sheet wasn't crazy, but if you watch, you see his impact. Defensively, I mean, it's night and day, like when you compare him and Lonnie Walker. And I mean, his shooting stats on the Spurs, I remember we pulled it up on a couple lives ago. StatMoose showed it. Like since the trade, he was like 44% at one point, basically shot like 40% splits in like all the major shooting categories after the trade. I mean, he was exactly what we needed. And, I was like, yeah, I'm down with the qualifying offer to have Lonnie as our sixth man. It's like, that's kind of the gamble. And then you can just go, or you could go with Josh Richardson and just get the for sure thing NBA vet. And as Pop said, brought a little bit of nasty. I think that was needed too.
100.
Yeah. So the one thing that our man M-Easy does bring up though is that it could cut into minutes for Primo, Vassell, and Lonnie. Depending on, I think if we bring Richardson back or J. Rich, I think that Lonnie's gone. So in that scenario, I think that Vassell will probably still be starting. And they might play J. Rich at the 3 and play Primo at the 2. Or maybe they play J. Rich at the 2 and Primo at the 3. So I actually think that would work out. Unless we make some other signings and then Primo's not playing. But I think that we're going to keep kind of giving these young guys minutes as we did with Devin and Keldon. And like in each season with the ones we believe in, our first round guys, give them a little bit more of a jump if they keep progressing.
I agree.
But let's move on now to the rest of the gang. These are the final 4, actually the final 3, and I'm just going to do them all 3 together just so we can wrap these up. And that's Joe Wieskamp, Devontae Cacok, and the legend Romeo Langford.
What to say? Weezy in the G League was a dynamite 3-point shooter, but I don't think he hit but maybe 1 or 2 when he came up to the NBA. Like the dude couldn't get his shot to fall, so just get his confidence under wraps.
Another year in the G League, you think?
Yeah, I think so, probably.
Yeah, another 2-way for
I like Devontae Cacok. I think he's an animal. I think we should actually think about giving him some minutes off the bench. Yeah. And then who was the last one?
Romeo Langford. Who is technically a restricted free agent.
Wow. I don't know if we'll bring him back.
It's like a $5 million qualifying deal.
If we can get him in the gym with Chip. I just honestly didn't see enough of Romeo, which was Boston's complaint too. Like I literally almost saw nothing. When I did see him, I liked it. He just couldn't shoot.
Yeah, that was the only problem. He could shoot mid-range, just couldn't shoot the 3. Oh my gosh. Yeah, in those 3 guys, I mean, Cacok brings some physicality that we kind of talk about with Jakob not having and the Spurs lacking. I'd like to see how he progresses just with his ability. The problem is though, like you have to play him next to a shooter. Like you have no choice but to play him next to a shooting big because he can't shoot. But everything else with Cacok, he's really a solid player and a solid 4. Not anything game breaking, but I'd like to see a little bit more of him too. I wonder if he can really become like is he a backup 4 on a championship team? I don't know, but I like Cacok. I'm down to bring him back, especially as the 3rd string 4. Like I would 100% be down for that. He's like Eubanks 2.0 but better.
He's got some ability, man. I like my boy Cacok.
And then in regards to Weezy, shout out to his work on the Austin Spurs. Yeah, not too much. We didn't get anything meaningful really from him this year. And then Romeo, I mean, came in, played minutes that one game, had a great game until he shot the ball. And then it was like, oh no, oh God. And then, but I mean, a solid defender, I liked what I saw from Romeo. I think at best with Romeo Langford, I'd be cool to bring him back as a 3rd string 3. I think he would be, if we can get him back on a reasonable deal, like that's going to be better than any other, third string three that we could probably go get, at least potential wise, and somebody that you could develop. If you want to go get a vet, I'm cool with that too. But you already kind of have J. Rich kind of in that role there.
Yeah,
so
and McDermott.
So I'd be down to bring Romeo back just to fill another roster spot and see how he develops, and who knows, maybe we unlock something in him. I doubt it, but I think the Spurs traded for him for a reason. I think when they got those two guys, like, they wanted them. It wasn't just like, oh, we're taking these guys on. Like, they brought something to the team that they thought would be good.
Yes.
Alrighty. Well, I think at an hour and 5 minutes, Ethan, there's no reason to talk about DJ Stewart Jr. and Robert Woodard II, who were our two-way deals after we signed Wieskamp and Kaycock. And I just want to say that it's super ironic because both of those guys are literally Quindary's, like, Padawans. I didn't even realize it, but they're both from Mississippi State. So when Quindary was a senior, these were the youngins. These are the guys who came in after him and were actually way better. So anyways, we'll stop talking about Quindary. He's technically still in the playoffs, right? He's on the Warriors. So Quindary, the one Spur. What Spurs are alive in the playoffs? Let's wrap up with that. Actually,
we got
Patty, no LaMarcus.
Derek White for the Boston Celtics.
Yes.
Kyle Anderson for the Memphis Grizzlies.
Gorgie Jang.
No, he's out.
Oh,
he played for Atlanta, I'm pretty sure.
Payne, you're absolutely right. I thought he was on the Grizzlies at one point.
Yeah, he was.
I know there's some other ones that we're forgetting.
This is really interesting.
The Suns don't have anybody. The
Warriors have Quindary. Memphis has Kyle.
Nobody on the Mavericks.
Rudy
Gay.
Boban Marjanovic.
And Rudy Gay's not even playing right now.
No,
that's the weird thing. But that was what it was.
It's almost like he was washed last year.
He did so much for us, though, in the play.
Yeah, he really did. He tried his hardest.
And now now they're going to get beat. But honestly, I hate to say it. I mean, look, I get that it was probably an easy transition going from Pop to Quinn Snyder, somebody who's familiar with the Spurs. But, bruh, the Jazz are notoriously fraudulent. They're a regular season team. You just can't. They may even win this series, but it doesn't matter because they're not advancing after that. And I don't think that they're going to win this. But anyways, that was, yeah. I know you got to go where you want to. You only have so many offers, but I feel like you sign a minimum with the Warriors, you're sitting pretty right now, Rudy. You already made a lot of money, bro.
Bryn is also still technically
there. You go. Yeah. I forgot where we even traded him.
He's in Denver. With Juancho.
There you go. Yes, Juancho. There you go.
Oh, yeah, right. George Hill also, yeah.
Yes. Oh, Georgie, man. I can't believe I forgot about Georgie. That would be somebody that I would be down to have as a third-string point guard next year. Completely off topic. I would love to bring George Hill back maybe not even this year, just at some point in his career if we keep rolling with Dejounte and Tre Jones. Would love to bring Georgie back as a minimum.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah, would love that. All right. Well, we appreciate you guys for coming out today. We will be back with some more content. We'll be trying to make some more clips as well. It's the off season, so there's a lot more openness kind of with just our ideas. We might do some other fun Spurs stuff as well. Maybe even talk about the playoffs a little bit. We mentioned that. Maybe give some predictions on some series, stuff like that. But if you enjoyed today, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can also listen to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any of the other places. Just pay attention to Ethan and you'll know what's happening. Follow us on Twitter at Ethan_Quintero and at Jude McLaren to stay updated with the show. And then if you want to go get some merchandise of ours, you can go ahead and head over to SpursTubeTV.com and check out the content on that channel as well. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch y'all in the next one, and it's been fun.